forgot or if you are not passed any values or some values if you not pass it, then default the compiler will take the values here. The main program can be called as calling function and subprogram can be called as call function here. From main program to subprogram, we can able to pass the arguments. Whereas in call by value, there what happens? The main program will send the data, but subprogram what it will do? There it will take a copy of the data and it will work on that. Welcome back to one and all. Myself, Vasanta, lecturer in computer science, Vidhyaashram, Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence, Mysore. Today, we are going to start with the fourth session of user-defined function chapters. Whereas in the previous session, you have studied regarding functions with no argument and no return value. That is, no values are passing from first function to second function. In the same way, no values are passing from second function to first function. Then functions with arguments and with no return value. It means that here from first function to second function, arguments are passing, but from the second function to first function, arguments are not passing. Functions with no argument and with return value. There is no any transfer of data from function 1 to function 2, but there will be a return value from function 2 to function 1. Then functions with argument and with return value. Here, from both the function, arguments are passing here. And the last one is recursive function. Recursive is nothing but repetitions here. Here, the functions will execute again and again. Regarding that, you have studied in the previous session. Whereas on today's session, you will come to know regarding passing default arguments to functions. If you not pass the values, then default, how we can be able to pass the arguments to a function, then uses of default values. What exactly this default value will perform and what are the major advantages of default values, then pass by value or we can say that call by value, then pass by reference or call by reference. Now one by one we'll discuss. First we'll discuss about passing default arguments to functions. What do you mean by this? Passing default arguments. If you not pass the values, exactly if you are not passed the values on that time, by default, by itself, it will pass some values. That is nothing but default arguments to functions here. In C++, to call a function, we need not to pass all values for arguments to a function from the calling functions. If you forgot or if you are not passed any values or some values if you not pass it, then default the compiler will take the values here. It allows us to assign a default value to the formal arguments here. Then default values can be assigned to the arguments which does not have matching arguments in the function call. For example, from the main program, we'll say that we'll pass 3 values, but we have passed only 2 values. For example, 1 and 2 values we have passed to the subfunction. In the beginning, we have declared that we'll pass 3 values to the subfunction. Then what happens? The compiler itself, it will take the default value for the third one. Then here, the default values are assigned in the function prototype. Prototype is nothing but before using that function, we have to declare. The default values are assigned to the arguments as initialized variables here. That we'll explain with one example. Consider we have declared the return type is float format. After calculation, it has to generate the result in float format and the function name here we are given as interest. In this, we have 3 arguments: float, amount, int, time and float rate equals 0.15. Then simple interest equals interest 5,000, 5 we are given. Then default, the compiler, the third variable value here we are not assigned. That itself it will take the values now afterwards. Then simple interest equals 5,000, 5, then 0.2 by missing the missing variable. It will take the default values here. This is regarding passing default arguments to the function. Next, when they come on the uses of default values, there already I told you if you not pass the values from main program to subprogram or from one function to another function, then default value will help to pass the value and we can able to easily calculate our result here. The default arguments are useful in a situations where some arguments always have same values. Whenever it will take same values, on that time we are using this default arguments here. And default arguments provide flexibility to the programmer. Mainly it provides the flexibility. The user can, if they forgot to give the values, then default it will take. Default arguments are used to add new arguments to the existing functions. And when you come on, default arguments are used to combine similar functions into one type here. Similar type of functions, values can be combined and it will generate a single result here. These are the major users of default values, especially default arguments. Next, when we come on passing constant arguments, we can able to pass constant values. What do you mean by constant? The constant is nothing but its value will never change during the execution of the program. That is nothing but constant. But when they come on variable, there its value will change during the execution of the program. Whereas here, this value will remain constant. For example, pi value. Pi is 3.14, that is constant value. Like that, here constant is nothing but its value will never change during the execution of the program. In C++, we can declare some arguments as constant. Arguments is nothing but values can be constant. The compiler cannot modify the arguments marked as constant here. The compiler will not make any changes when we are declared as a constant. For example, here int string length const char star p here we are given. Then here int total const x constant y here we are given. It means that when I am going to declare it as a const, then its value will never change. Then next we will move on pass by value. This pass by value is also called as call by value. In two methods we can able to pass, one by using call by value and one more by using call by reference. In call by value, the main advantage here, the main program or from function 1 to function 2 will send the arguments, but the sub-function will take the copy of the data and it will work on that. If there is any change made in the sub-program, that will not affect the main program values. For example, consider I want to arrange one function. There, what I will do, I divide that function to small unit. One has to take care regarding card distribution, one has to take care regarding stage arrangement, and one has to take care regarding food arrangement, like that. For example, in the main program, just going to give the arguments to the stage decoration function. There I am going to say that these are the values, these are the items. By using these items, you have to decorate the stage. Then the subprogram, the stage decoration function, what exactly it will do? It will not take the data as it is, whichever arguments, whichever data in the main program we are given, but it takes a copy of the data. Whatever arguments, whatever items are given, it will not take the same item. It takes a copy of the data and it will work on that. That's why if there is any change made in the subprogram, that will not affect the main program here. That is nothing but call by value. Whereas here, already I told you, the subprogram will not take the data as it is. Whichever item in the main program we are given, that will not taken by as it is directly by the subprogram. But it takes the copy of the data and then it will work on that. That's why if they make any changes in the data, arguments, values in the subprogram, that will not affect the main program because it takes a copy and then it will work on that. That is nothing but call by value or pass by value. Here, a function can be called by passing arguments from the calling function into the called function. Here we are going to, the main program can be called as calling function and subprogram can be called as called function here. From main program to subprogram, we can able to pass the arguments. Thus, data is transferred through argument list here. The calling function sends the data to the called function through the actual parameters. The called function receives the data into its corresponding formal parameters. In pass by value, a copy of data, especially here, the copy of data sent by calling function stored in temporary location. Here we have one main program. Consider here we have one main program and one more is subprogram. Here main program will send the data. But what exactly the subprogram will do? Whatever data here, for example, A and B is the value which I'm going to give, pass from main program to subprogram. But whereas subprogram, what it will do? It takes a copy of this A and B value and then it will works on that. Then if there is any change in these values, that will not affect the main program because it takes a copy of the data. The call function uses these values as initial values of the formal parameters. The formal parameters are processed or changed to generate the required result. Whatever values we have passed, that may change us at the time of calculation, but it will not affect the main program. The value of the formal parameters may then change in the body of the function, but this will not change the value of the actual parameters. That is, original value will not change us here. Actual means actual parameter is the original values which we are passing from main program. Formal parameter is nothing but the values or arguments which is work in the subprogram. Now we'll explain this with one example. Consider we want to write a program, or we are writing a program to swap the values of two variables. For example, here I am to take one variable is A and another variable is B. How to swap can be performed? For example, here we have 5 and here we have 6. First stage, we will create one temporary variable. Whatever value here, that will pass here. Now this space is free. Then later on, B value will pass here. Now B become free. Then later on, temporary value can pass here. It means that swapping can be performed by using third variable as well as without using third variable also, we can able to perform swapping. First, as usual, we want to start with the void main. Here, prototype declaration. That is, there is no return type specifier. There is no any return value. The function name we are given as swap and two arguments we are taking of type integer. Then int as well as here also we are int. This can be called as function prototype. Before using this function, we have to declare, that is nothing but function prototype. Here we are declaring the variable int A and B, then clear screen. Whereas here, cout, enter two numbers. In the output screen, you will get enter two numbers, then we will input the two values. That is C in extraction operator A, extraction operator B. Then afterwards, cout, before calling the function, A value equals as well as B value equals, it will display. For example, in the output screen, we will enter two numbers 2 and 3. Then here, for A it will take 2 and B it will take 3. Then we'll call the sub function now, actual arguments, that is A and B. Here swap A comma B. Now we are calling the sub program. It means that on this time the control will transfer to this function, swap function. Their swapping will perform. Then afterwards, after calling the function, A and B value will changes, then get ch. Then here we are closing the main program. This is nothing but, this is the main program. Here we are declare the prototype. Then afterwards we are called the subprogram. But what exactly the subprogram contains? In the subprogram we have void swap int x comma int y. It means that two values we are taking from main program, and these two values of type integer only. Here we are creating temporary variable. First step, whatever thing in the x, that we will move to temporary place. Consider this is x and this is y. Here we have 2 and here we have 3. First stage, what we have done, whatever thing in x, that we will move to temporary place 2. Now this place become free. Then afterwards, whatever value in x, whatever value in y, that will move to x here. This value we will move here. Now this place become free. Then afterwards, whatever thing in the temporary, that we will move to y. The temp value we will move here. Now this place become free. Then finally, close this function. Whereas in the output screen, enter two numbers. Then 10 and 20 will enter. Before swapping, A value is 10, B value is 20. After calling the sub program, that is swap, A value will be 20 and B value will be 10. That is, your swapping are performed here. This is nothing but call by value or pass by value. Next, we will move on pass by reference, or this also called as call by reference also. What do you mean by this reference? Whereas here in the reference, the main program will send the address of the data, where exactly the data is present. Whereas a subprogram will take the data as it is from that address and it will work on that. Consider we have one main program, this something called as main program, and one more subprogram. The main program has to send the data, no? While sending the data, it will send the address. Reference address of the data. Whereas what exactly the subprogram will do? Whatever thing in this address, whatever data in that address, it takes the data and it will work on that. Directly it will work on the same data itself. Whereas in call by value, there what happens? The main program will send the data, but subprogram what it will do? There it will take the copy of the data and it will work on that. Whereas in call by reference, it is referring the address where exactly the data is present. On that address, whichever data is there, it takes the same data and it will work on the same data itself. That's why if there is any change in the data, that also affects the main program here. Whereas here, for example, A and B values I am sending, where exactly A and B as A and D address I will send, the same data here will take A and B. Then it will work on this. If there is any change in A and B, that also affects the main program here. That is nothing but call by reference or pass by reference. In value, what happens? It takes a copy and then works. Whereas in reference, on that reference address, whatever data is there, it takes the same data and it works on that. Sometimes we need to change the values of actual arguments in the calling function. This is not possible in pass by value method. In pass by value method, we cannot able to change because it takes a copy and then work. But in the situations when you want to change values in both main function as well as sub function, then we require this call by reference concept, where C++ allows us to pass arguments to the function by passing reference variables. Reference address, it will tell. When we pass arguments by reference, the formal arguments in the called functions becomes the aliases to the actual arguments of the calling functions. That is, here in the main program, I am to send the values A and B. The same values are worked by some other names, for example, C and D. That means only the name will change us, but data as it is on that address, whichever data is there, on that address, whatever data we have, the same data it will work, but by some other name. The called function is actually used as the original data with a different name, that's all. It takes the same data, but some other different names. Any changes made to the formal parameters in the call function will affect the actual parameters also. Already I told you, actual means the data which is present at main program. Formal is nothing but the data which is present at subprogram. Here, both the values will change here. Consider the example. Here, void main, the same way will take swapping of two numbers. Here in this main program, void swap int ampersand, int ampersand. Here we are sending the address, that is here we are declaring the function prototype. Whereas in pass by value, there we are not sending the address, we are sending the data, but the subprogram will take the copy of the data and it will work on that. Whereas here we are sending the address. As usual, we are declaring two variables, int A and B. Then cout, enter two numbers, we will input the two variables A and B. Then before calling the functions, what exactly A value as well as B value it will display. Then we will call the subprogram swap. Here what happens, when we call the subprogram, the value will interchange here. For example, in the beginning, A we are declared as 10 and B as 20. When I call the swap program, what happens? The value will interchange. Then A and B value will interchange here. Now A is 20 and B is 10 here. Then get ch and then close the main program which you opened. It means that here we are calling the sub function, but here mainly we are using the reference, call by reference. In the example also, we are done word swap int ampersand x int ampersand y. That means we are sending the address of x as well as y. Then swapping will perform. Then a and b value, that is 10 and 20, and it will display before swapping a value is 10 as well as b value is 20. After swapping, A is 20 as well as B is 10. Like this, the swapping will perform here. On this chapter, you have studied regarding what you mean by user-defined function. Whereas user-defined function means here functions are defined by the user itself. Whereas library functions, there what happens? It is predefined function, only we are using the functionalities. Whereas in user-defined function, users are developing the programs. There, when we come on this, we have pass by value, pass by reference, how to call the functions, everything you have studied. This completes your user-defined chapter. Next class, once again, we'll meet you with a new chapter. Thank you for all of you.